Mr. Hastovich's United States History Online Lecture Series, Chapter 1, Roots of the United States Constitution. Whenever I've traveled outside the country, the first thing most people I encounter want to know is, what's America like? This question is so broad and can be interpreted in so many different ways, I never know how to answer it in less time than it would take to bore my inquirers. So I tell them instead, get to know the United States Constitution, and then you'll know America. Now, why would I answer such a simple question with such a complex answer? Well, the truth is, our Constitution is the single greatest symbol of everything our country is and has been. To know it is to know us. As Americans are varied and diverse as far as people go, the Constitution was designed to govern a wide swath of people, with a dearth of opinions and characteristics that don't often seem to mesh well. America is the most influential nation on the planet, and the Constitution has been the most influential historical and legal document written in the last 220 years, influencing hundreds of other nations' constitutions and even the Charter of the United Nations. America continually grows, strengthens, and redefines itself after a period of tumultuous chaos, as does the Constitution. However, just as the United States has not always been the land of the free, the rights under the Constitution were not always designed to protect all in her land. But how did such an amazing document that has endured longer than any of its contemporaries come to be? It is perhaps easiest to divide the history of the Constitution into two eras: its history before the Revolutionary War and its history afterwards. Pre-revolutionary influences. To understand its history before the Revolutionary War for Independence in 1776, one must first look all the way back to the Ten Commandments, a set of laws that laid the early foundation for the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim faiths. Roughly 3,300 years old, the Ten Commandments laid out a clear example of right and wrong for peoples, hence nations. As a whole, they established the notion of a greater good, a set of duties a people owed one another as well as themselves in exchange for the privilege to be a member of that society. Many of the laws and values set forth in the commandments are still valid today, such as Commandment 6, Thou shalt not kill, Commandment 5, Honor thy father and thy mother. Commandment 8, interestingly enough, would set forth a value that would be directly fundamental in establishing the United States. Commandment 8, Thou shalt not steal, is the first recorded law which extends protection over property in general and without distinction. Fast forward now about 2,400 years to medieval England. In 1215, the ruling monarch, King John, had become rather drunk with and abusive of his royal powers. A revolt broke out among many of the English noblemen against their monarch, and they forced King John to sign the Magna Carta, or Great Charter, which granted his subjects certain rights. The significance of this historic moment cannot be understated. This is the first time in written history that subjects of an all-powerful monarch forced that monarch to recognize that they had rights he had to respect. These rights included habeas corpus, the right to know what crime you've been arrested for and charged with, the necessity to confer with his subjects before the king could declare war, as well as rights that noblemen possessed concerning being taxed and with whom they could marry, among others. Most significantly, the Magna Carta began a very important precedent. It made law and government a participatory sport. That is, the king henceforth would never be able to rule unfettered again. Here on out, that monarch would have to consult with the people, which at this time meant a few wealthy, powerful members of the nobility, before committing his nation to any significant action. The next big step in our Constitution's history comes from John Locke, an English philosopher widely respected during his lifetime for being a champion of liberty in the face of governmental oppression. Locke's chief argument was that government itself was a creation of a people, not a person, and as such, the government's ability to rule came entirely from the people to whom it applied. Now, this hinted at some very revolutionary and radical ideas, because if a government ruled only by the permission of those who were governed by it, perhaps those who were governed could also change the government to better fit their wants and needs. Locke also argued for the government's chief responsibilities laying in protecting people's liberties as well as their property, most often from itself. Now, during Locke's lifetime, and fact, during the same year he wrote 2 treatises of government, England added another significant boulder to the foundation of what would become our Constitution. The English Bill of Rights emerged out of roughly half a century of bloody civil and religious warfare in England and would become a powerhouse of rights, protections, and guarantees for her citizens. Among these rights, which would later both serve as inspiration for our own Revolutionary War as well as the Constitution, included the right to not be taxed by the government without having a say in the process, the right to petition or complain to the government, freedom from cruel and unusual punishment as well as excessive bail, restrictions that would prove very useful in case a tyrannical government decided to keep those who might complain cowering in fear, and lastly, the right to a fair trial. Now, at the same time England was enmeshed in this bloody as well as politically progressive turmoil, the British colonies in America were beginning to prosper, largely due to the great deal of autonomy and freedom England had permitted them to govern themselves. The House of Burgesses was a lawmaking body in Virginia that began shortly after the colony began. Since travel between England and the New World was so treacherous as well as time-consuming, 2 months was considered a short trip, the Virginia colony would have to possess some form of self-government if it was to survive. And so in 1619, the House of Burgesses was founded. Members of the colony were elected to determine laws concerning taxes on the colony, marriage, and land rights, among others. These laws also had to be approved by both the royally appointed governor of Virginia as well as the king himself, but they did give colonials a great deal of control over their local political situation, as well as a feeling that they were involved in governing themselves with their monarch. Most significantly, due to the House of Burgesses and other such legislative bodies in other colonies, colonial citizens quickly got used to having a great deal of say in their local governments and began to see the crown as a limited monarch, that is, a partner, if you will, in rule. By the time the House of Burgesses was shut down 150 years later in 1769, due to its members' protests against the taxes that Parliament levied upon them without their say-so, it had counted George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Patrick "Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death" Henry among its members, a very formidable group of people that England would later wish they had never enraged.